I want to welcome you to another Mental Design Academy event, this time in partnership with Creative Team. Today, we're talking about how to become UX UI designer. So hopefully we got a lot of people interested in that. We're going to briefly go through what is UX, UI, or product design. I know maybe some of you are already familiar with that. There's tons of definitions out there. So we're just going to give you our definition because I think that's important. Then how do you know this kind of role is right for you? And how do you learn to become that person? And then we're going to cover Raluca's success story. She's an alumni. And then we're going to get to Q&A. My name is Radu. I've been a designer for the past 20 years. I've really seen many environments in which you can be a designer. So I was a freelancer. I then went to work for a design agency. I got to spend time with companies like Adobe and Fitbit and Google. Now I'm running my own design studio. After these many years, I decided to share that experience that I've got through Mental Design Academy, which is a UX bootcamp. I also built it on the experience of mentoring for other programs, and I really wanted to provide a more customized experience for everyone, something that was a little bit more meaningful, that had real projects that spoke to the background of everyone. That's how we built Mental Design Academy.
I'm Raluca. Nice to meet you all. I'm a product designer working with Xperi, a very nice design studio. And at the same time, I'm a student success manager at Mental Design Academy. That means that I'm working closely with Radu to make sure that all our students have the best experience possible, and we are supporting them as much as we can towards this transition to design. I've also been a student at Mento, now a happy product designer. And towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to share a little bit of my story as well with you, and then we can go into the Q&A.
Thank you, Raluca. Who's this event for? We're really anyone who's interested in hearing more about what UX is. Maybe you've heard about it. Maybe you have a friend or two that work as UX designers, and we just really want to help you understand a little bit more about the industry, what you can expect out of having a role like this, what it takes to become a UX designer. And this could also be for people who are looking to be freelancers, add another valuable skill. So maybe if you're like a front-end developer looking to understand better design and add that as a skill for yourself, then maybe that's for you as well. Or maybe you're like a manager and you want to understand how you can help your people. Maybe you manage like creative people, like graphic designers. You have someone interested in your team to transition to UX design. I know this is kind of basic, but let's define in our view what is UX, UI, or product design. And I think what is important to understand is kind of these terms. First off, there's no higher authority that's defining or monitoring or reviewing these definitions each year. So everybody has kind of their own definition, and every company has their own definition. And there's probably a dozen roles out there, UX architect, digital product designer, user interface designer. There's so many terminologies out there. And I guess that's a result of the industry being quite young as well. So we haven't settled on a particular definition. And I think, maybe it's going to take a while to get to that point. But let's kind of cover our definitions of what is UX, what is UI, and what is a product designer. So as I mentioned, these are all roles. And I guess what's important to understand is all of these roles contribute to building a digital product. So, maybe you have like a phone around the home, or like a TV. These are like physical products. They solve a need or a problem. And usually you have industrial designers that kind of define how these products look, how they work. Maybe you have like a kitchen appliance that you really love. That's designed by a physical product designer or an industrial designer. And then you have people that create interfaces or to interact with machines. And usually this is called a digital product design. And UX, UI, or product design roles are people contributing to building those products. So a UX designer is someone really who prioritizes the functionality and structure of digital products including information architecture. So that's kind of like how things are structured, task flows. So like what are the steps to achieve a certain goal? Interaction design, how do the various elements interact? How do they respond to you? Sometimes the definition of the role also encompasses research. So people would expect that a UX designer would also conduct research to validate whether their designs solve the problems of people. A UI designer, maybe this is a little more clear, is a user interface designer, someone who's concerned more with the design and the appearance. So if the first kind of role, UX, covers more like foundational things, UI designer is someone who's considering the aesthetics and the accessibility of an interface, making sure there's enough contrast, making sure the text is legible and that it's clear what's a button and what's a link and what's an image, right? And then we have the product designer. So the way I like to think about this is all of these roles work with a certain level of vagueness, right? And UX and UI designers tend to be more on the executional side. So they come in at a point where things are a little bit more well-defined than where a product designer might operate, because a product designer is also tasked with defining the kind of solutions that customers need. So, if a UX designer creates the foundations of a mobile app, needing a mobile app is maybe something that a product designer came up with because it could have been a web interface or something similar. So this kind of requires operating at a higher level of ambiguity compared to the more executional roles of UX and UI designers. The other term that's really not here, but I want to cover is what does a UX researcher does? Well, this is someone who maybe at their core is like a researcher, but they're activating in the industry of tech. And really their role is to decrease the risk of decisions through research, right? So if we build something, if we create a solution, you want to test out whether that solution works before we invest money into building it. And if we don't do that, the chances of us developing something that people don't need or want are higher, and that increases the risk and sometimes the cost. Designers will spend a lot of time not designing. And I think that's maybe something that shocks people sometimes. They spend time calibrating with people. They spend time uncovering the needs or the requirements of the business and the users. They might be spending time collaborating with developers. So a lot of our time is spent not doing design. And then presenting their work is something that also takes a lot of their time. So once you create a solution, you need to get it in front of the team, because you're really at the center of a team that creates a digital product. So you cannot get away from presenting your work. And that takes a lot of time. So most of the time, we talk with other people, we spend times in meetings, and we calibrate and we kind of help define what we need to do. And then the other half is spent actually designing. So that means, spending time in front of the computer, kind of thinking of like, okay, how would this interaction look like? Designing that in Figma or Sketch, right? So I think a lot of times people think, oh, I learned Figma, now I'm a designer. But that's like a very small portion of what a designer uses even as a tool. Like Figma is something that you use sometimes, but then you're going to have many other tools that you use to conduct your day-to-day work. A lot of people tend to think design is about art and you need to be an artist. You need to know how to paint. And if you don't see yourself as more of a creative person, then that means, oh, maybe I'm not a good designer. Well, that's not actually true. Like, you don't need to be a painter. If you couldn't draw when you were a kid, you're fine. You can still be a designer, because it's not about art. It's about creating things that solve problems and they have a functionality. It's really more of a science than art, right? You have ways to measure your output. You have ways to test it out. And it's a very technical job, actually. I don't think it's about art. And this is, I know, I just wanted to bust that myth, because there's a lot of people who think that. Now, what kind of skills do you need? Well, I think first off, it starts with just being naturally very curious and inquisitive. You tend to research, you tend to want to understand things better, you tend to deconstruct them. And that's really important. The output of your job is really solving problems. So you want to be a problem solver. For that, you need to be a good researcher. You want to understand people, you want to understand the context, you want to understand the problem, and then you need to deliver on that. You'll need to present your work. You need to have good presentation skills, good communication skills, because your work is going to be judged at the level that you're presenting it. Unfortunately, what I see a lot of times is designers cannot sell it at the level and the quality of their work. So then what happens, unfortunately, is their work gets judged at the level that they presented. And that's unfortunate because you've just put a lot of work into that. You've put a lot of energy and you got judged at lower level. And the opposite is true. If your work is not that great, but you can present it in an amazing way, then what's going to happen is it's going to be perceived better than it was. The last skill I would mention here is being able to operate with ambiguity, because our job is about finding, you need to find the problem, the solution. You need to find more about customers. It's always about finding. There's very few things that are well defined. And that can become stressful, especially for first-time designers. That can become incredibly stressful because they're like, okay, what do I need to do? Tell me clearly. And the unfortunate thing is your job is to find that. It's not somebody else's. You need to find what you need to do. You need to find what's the problem. And that can be very frustrating. Why you might consider becoming a UX designer, or why someone in your team might consider, right? If you're a manager trying to upskill people, if you're a freelancer, like a front-end developer, why you might be interested in acquiring a new skill. Or if you're not in the tech industry, what does this role mean and why you might consider becoming a UX designer? Well, I think what we've heard a lot from our students, they're looking for a job that allows them to be more creative. Maybe they have something that doesn't allow them to express their creativity, a role that's more intellectually challenging. You might want to upskill from something like a graphic designer. Maybe you want to add a more valuable skill on top of what you already know, or like freelance front-end developer, and add to that. Or you might want to reskill and move from a completely different role. And Raluca here, she was working in consultancy, so she did a complete reskill. Obviously, money is a big thing of why sometimes people think of UX design. Ideally, I hope it's not only that, because yes, it tends to be better paid, but if that's your only motivator, then the ups and downs. Right now we have like a bit of a recession, mass layoffs. People think, oh, it's bad, it's going downhill. If you're really passionate about the industry, about the kind of craft, about solving problems for people, then that's going to phase you less than if you're in only for the benefits and the money. And then obviously, as a career in tech, this allows you more room to grow. So you can grow into like a really specialized individual contributor, or you can grow into a manager role, a leadership role, and you can influence through leadership and mentorship products and teams. So at some point, you kind of have two tracks that you could develop yourself. You can become an entrepreneur. And we've had people that were developing their own business, and they came to us because they said, I want to learn this for myself. Like I'm not learning this to transition to a career in UX. I'm not doing this to get a job. I am doing this to learn more for myself. And then kind of the big elephant in the room, is this future proof? Like, is this career future proof? And will I still have a job next year? Is it even worth it right now to do this, right, with AI and everything? And my belief is our world is going through a transformation. So I don't think anyone's job is going to be what it is today in 10 years. It's always changing, and it's been changing for the past 30 years, and roles are transforming. So again, coming back to my initial point is pick this because you're passionate about design, because your role is going to morph into something else anyways. And yeah, my belief obviously. Otherwise, I always joke that I have a backup career as a chef because I love cooking, but that never happened in the past 20 years that I've been a designer, and I don't think I'm going to be a chef anytime soon because there's always things to design and develop. So I'm pretty confident there. All right. So then, is it like, if it's so good, what are some challenges? Like, why isn't everyone a designer by now? It's all good, it's all great, well-paid job. There's like a lot of growth in terms of career. What are some challenges? And I think the main one that I've mentioned is operating with ambiguity, because people do not expect this. Like, most roles tend to be a little more clear-cut, like finance, right? Or I would say maybe legal, but I'm not an expert, so hopefully I'm not making any big mistakes here mentioning that. But I think some roles tend to be more clear-cut than others. And I think the main challenge that we see with our students is this ambiguity, and being able to be not confident, but kind of like okay with it, and swim through it and try to get to something that's a bit more defined. And that's by far the most challenging thing. The other one is perfection. Because we grew up in school learning that once we turn in an assignment, there's no taking it back. So it needs to be great. And then once you turn it in, it gets graded. And then when it gets graded, that's it, and you cannot take back. Well, the industry doesn't work like that. And I'm sure our audience, at least developers, are kind of familiar with that, is you're going to iterate constantly on something. So there's no done. There's no like, oh, I'm done. This is it. You're always going to take it back. You're always going to iterate on it. You're always going to have to improve it. So being a perfectionist, that's going to stop you, because you're not going to put it out there and you're not going to ship it until you feel it's perfect. And that's kind of challenging because that's not how the industry works. I have here something that I named the 7 deadly sins that will stop you from succeeding. I think another one that I see often is looking for recipes. I understand there's a lot of content out there that says 5 steps to deliver the best product or like create an amazing design. I don't think recipes exist. I think the best recipe that I've found so far is it depends, which means I look at the context and I come up with the best solution in the moment. I think we've been sold on many frameworks like design thinking and double diamond, and then you get into practice and you discover it's not really like that. And then the last challenge, realizing it's actually hard work. I saw some TikToks with people saying like, let me show you a day in the life of a designer. And then they were sipping coffees all day and lounging on chairs. I guarantee that's not the real life of a designer. Rolka here can testify to that. It's actually a lot of hard work. And sometimes it's tedious work, right? It's not all milk and honey. Sometimes you have to do tedious things like update 100 wireframes or 25 rounded buttons to the right corner radius. And you're going to find out like it's hard work. Another thing that people think when they think about challenges is, oh, my background is a challenge. I can't do this because I have a background in healthcare and I've never done tech. Or I have a background in marketing or education or psychology. Well, what you're seeing here on the screen is sort of the distribution of our students so far at Mento Design Academy for the past 2.5 years and their background. So as you can see, of course, graphic and visual design is one of our top backgrounds because people already hold some knowledge into it. So it's easier for them. But then look at the next one, it's healthcare. This is not someone who's been thinking of code or design or wire flows or prototyping tools or Figma at all. And yet it's our second most popular background that people come from. Psychology, art, fashion, architecture, hospitality, HR, science. I don't think there's a background that we haven't seen. And I don't think the background can stop you. If anything, it can be an advantage because all of these backgrounds map to an industry. So, healthcare, you have the health and fitness industry in tech, which is quite big. And healthcare will, if not already, going through a huge digital transformation because a lot of the things in healthcare are quite outdated. So becoming a designer with a background in the industry that you're disrupting is a unique advantage compared to everyone else, compared to someone who's coming from a traditional art school or design school, right? You having also domain knowledge is very valuable. And I have this example I tell people. When I was a manager at Fitbit, which is a health and fitness company, one of my first hires was a designer that went to medical school, did 6 years of school, 2 years of practice. So that's already 8 years into a career. That's not easy. It's very demanding. And then he decided being a doctor is not for me. He went to another marketing university. And then he became a designer, and he went to work for a pharmaceutical company based out of New York. And then he had a portfolio that was relevant to the health and fitness industry. And then he applied at Fitbit. And, that sort of story where you kind of align background with portfolio and the kind of company that you apply to made a lot of sense. All of your background, if put in the right light, that you align it with your portfolio and the kind of companies you want to apply to as a UX designer, can actually be a unique advantage. If anything, is quite the opposite of what many people think of, like, oh, I haven't done tech up until now. Can I still do it? Yes. And you're going to have a unique advantage. If you're transitioning right now, if you are in a different role and you want to move to a design career, your background first is something that can make you stand out. It can be unique. The other thing I would say is, yes, there's a lot of competition in the industry, like any other industry that pays well and it has a low entry barrier. So it's very easy to stand out, to do things a little bit different. The first one I would say is do things purpose. Go into design because you're passionate about it. Tackle an industry that you have background or a passion into. And you're already better than 50% of people. Don't be generic when you apply to companies and you're already 60% better than most applicants, because very few people take the time to send like a personalized application, or like my pet peeve, what I tell people usually is like, send a video application. How do you learn how to become a designer? Like, where do you start? What kind of tools to learn? Is Sketch better than Figma? I think you need a couple of things to successfully transition. The first one would be to learn the basics. You can do that through online courses. You can do that through boot camps. You can do that through reading articles online and spending a lot of time on YouTube. I think the main challenge here is knowing what to pay attention to and what's actually used in practice and what's not. Because if 20 years ago we had sort of like, it was coming across information and getting information was a little bit harder, internet was a little bit slower. Now you have an abundance of information and everybody can create, everybody can put stuff out there, including us today and this webinar. So I think it's a little bit harder to know what you should pay attention to, what's actually used in practice. Generally, books will become outdated very fast due to how fast the industry is evolving. Articles are great, but again, it's hard to know which one to pay attention to and which not. This is why I think on top of learning, you need a mentor, someone who's actually a designer today, practicing, and they can tell you, like, yeah, pay attention to that. That's important, and that's something that I've never heard of or never used. One example that comes to mind now is I hear a lot of times people saying like, oh, I need to craft my resume for keywords because companies use keywords to triage applicants. Like I recently asked 2 recruiters, one at Google, one at Facebook. I was like, is that real? Because I never heard of that. And I've recruited over 50 designers myself, and I never used that. And I never heard of that. So I'm like, hey, do you guys use this? And they were like, no, we never heard of that. So I guess there's a lot of myths in the industry. And a mentor can help you sift through that noise and kind of make sure, I think the downside is, you could be spending more time than needed because you're going to get there eventually, right? Even with less quality information. But I think what can accelerate that is a mentor. And then at the end of the day, basic knowledge, mentorship, they're all great, but you need to show a potential employer or customer, if you're a freelancer, how to apply that knowledge that you got to actually build something. So you need a portfolio. Now, in terms of what can get you that, like I mentioned, you can piecemeal it together. You can do self-managed course on Coursera or Udemy. You can watch YouTube videos. You can work on a project yourself, or you can enroll in a bootcamp. And that's another way that can provide value and can accelerate your growth. How do you know what's right for you? Should I do courses? Should I do YouTube videos? Should I do bootcamps or go to university? I think this really depends on how fast you want to get there. And with each option, you're going to get there faster or slower, depending on how disciplined and diligent you are. I think if you don't have a lot of budget, but you have a lot of time and you're very disciplined and diligent, you can go with books and articles and YouTube videos and slowly build your portfolio. There's tools out there that offer platforms out there that offer free mentorship like ADP List. There's course platforms out there that only offer the information, so you still need to apply it to yourself, but that's a good option. There's obviously universities starting to come up now that we have a more mature practice. There's obviously a huge, especially in the United States, a huge cost associated with that, and generally a very lengthy time because they're 3-year programs. So you should factor that in if your goal is to do it in next year, for example. And then obviously boot camps, they're more expensive, but they generally provide a very guided path. So you waste less of your time and resources on things that don't work. The most successful approach to this that we've seen is people that, if you're already a freelancer or have a full-time job, we've seen people successfully transitioning in, roughly 6 to 8 months. This is important to mention, depends a lot on how disciplined and diligent you are, how fast you learn, how much you practice, but you can do this as a part-time thing, or you can do this as a full-time thing. What I want you also to hear from is Raluca, one of our alumni. She completed her program in 6 months. She's now working with me in my design studio. I was really impressed by the quality of her work, and I hired her before anyone could have the chance. And I would like to give her the opportunity to tell you a little bit about her experience. Raluca, you have the microphone.
Thank you, Radu. Yeah, happy to share my story with all of you. So I've already introduced myself, what I'm doing right now. I'm a product designer, and honestly, I have never imagined that I'm going to be a product designer. I graduated from a finance university, and I've always thought that I'm gonna stay in a corporate world, do emails, Excel files and a lot of numbers, even though I am really not good with finance, really not good with numbers. So yeah, I kind of started as a professional explorer of sorts. So I tried different roles until I discovered what's the best fit for me. Within a larger company, I did HR, I did, finance, audit. I did a lot of stuff. Recently, I ended up in consulting. So I was working in a large consulting firm. The job was good, but at the same time, I felt it wasn't the perfect fit for me. I wasn't super excited or accomplished in it. And it was a perfect timing in a way, because I was visiting one of my friends. There was a gathering with many people, and they were talking at some point about UX design. And I had absolutely no idea what UX design is. It sparked my interest just because it had design in it. I've always been passionate about interior design, for example, and design objects and art. So I thought, okay, what is UX design? This sounds interesting. So when I went home, I started like a deep dive into the subject. I found a lot of articles, a lot of YouTube videos. I even ordered books on UX UI design just to see what all is about. So I ordered the books from Dan Norman, for example. And the more I researched, the more I read, I actually came to the conclusion that UX design was for me the perfect blend of the aesthetic that I always wanted to have in a job. So attention to aesthetics and good looking things, but also combined with logic and psychology and science. So it was just the perfect mix that I was looking for. I didn't want to be an artist, for example, to have no rules like design has, but I also didn't want to be committed only to science. I wanted to have creativity as well. So UX design actually encompassed both, and it was something that I could achieve even without a background in design. So I just went for it. I said, okay, this is the one. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I'm just going to go into it. So initially, I started on the path of self-learning. I went on platforms and Udemy, Coursera, did a lot of courses there, learned a lot of stuff by myself, but those were mainly UI related and a lot of Figma. So at one point, I was really happy and telling all my friends that, hey, I know Figma now, so I'm a designer. But yeah, I soon realized that this is not enough. It's like, I don't know, just saying, Figma and being a designer is just saying, I don't know, you're a furniture designer because you know how to use a hammer, for example. So it was just a tool that I needed. And at that point, I remember a friend came to me and said, hey, can you make this website for me? And can you think of a way to do this? I was like, sure, of course I can. I know Figma. But then I realized that when I was learning, I was actually, copying and mimicking what I was seeing in the courses, and I didn't have a structure. I didn't have a guidance. I was just learning things, but I was just taking what I could get. So everything was like chaotic in a way and unstructured. So that was the point when I decided I want to join a bootcamp, and I researched some options for a while. Eventually, Mento was launched because I kind of started researching before Mento appeared. And when I saw Mento was on the market, I was like, okay, this sounds great. I really wanted a mentor. I really wanted a thought partner by my side. So someone who would be able to guide me and offer me feedback. So even if I had the consistency and a motivation to do everything myself, I just wanted someone to point me a little bit in the right direction the moment I would, go outside my path. And I really like that about Mento. And I also wanted to work on projects that spoke to me. So projects that resonated with myself. I didn't want to do the same project as everyone else, something that I wouldn't enjoy, just copying what others are doing. And this is another reason why I went to Mento, because I had the opportunity to work on portfolio projects that were tailored to me and my interests. For example, my practice project in Mento was an app for museums. That's because I really love going to art museums. So I had full flexibility to do that, and learned a lot along the way, and had a great experience. And at the same time, I'm also the person that cannot do something if I don't understand the why behind of it. So if I don't understand why I'm doing something, it's just absolutely impossible for me to do it. I ask you over and over again, okay, but what's the purpose of this, and why are we doing this? Because I need to understand. I'm not going to do that just because. And that's another thing that I learned in Mento, to always be able to articulate my design decisions, even if it's about a button or a color or doing research, absolutely everything. I learned to be able to have a reason for everything, a reason for what I'm learning. So this was super valuable to me. As you can probably guess, and from what Radu mentioned, I really enjoyed the experience. I managed to get a job as soon as I graduated, even like a bit before. And yeah, now I'm a happy product designer, so to say. And I actually believe this was the best decision that I could take in my life, even though that sounds a little bit, too much, but that's really true. And yeah, that's it for my story for now. But if you have any questions for me or for Radu, please feel free to share them in the chat. And also later on, we can connect on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to talk more.
Awesome. Thank you, Raluca, for that overview. All right. So to the bravest of you all, we can invite you to ask your questions live. And I think the first person that asked a question was Fiana. Hope I'm not butchering your name. Would you like to come to the stage, ask your question? We can unmute you. Let's see. We sent a request. So if you want, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hello, you actually did say my name correctly.
Okay.
So that's cool. But yeah, I wanted to know if in your experience, do most companies kind of lump UX and UI designers together, like expecting you to know both? And if so, like what kind of companies separate the two more? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. I would say this will be heavily dependent on the size of the company. So if it's a small company, it's going to have less resources to hire a huge team. So then they need more people to cover more areas. So being a journalist, being able to approach multiple challenges will be beneficial. If this is a huge company and you have a team of, say, 100 designers, then they might be looking for specialized roles. And for example, at Fitbit, we had one person that was handling all illustrations for the app. So she was only doing that and only being focused on something. And then we had a specialized UX research team. This was a team of 80 to 100 designers, pretty large. I guess the most common setup you'll find is generally smaller teams. So I think it can be beneficial if you're focused, or you can learn about all of them. But I don't think it's detrimental, or you don't have opportunities if you don't tackle UI. Some people are not really good at that, or they don't enjoy it, or some other people, they don't really enjoy UX research. That's fine. That's fine. Just let us know if we answered your question.
Yes, thank you. What I got was basically companies that are a bit larger, that have larger teams, have more resources to dedicate to UX and then UI, and
Absolutely.
smaller companies kind of require both.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for asking your question live. I think the next person was Gala. I'm going to send a request to unmute, and if you want, you can come on stage and ask your question live.
Hello. My question was there any advice that you would have when starting your career? Were there any pitfalls that you experienced that you would tell a new designer, try to avoid this or don't go down that road?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I've been a designer for 20 years, so I had a lot of time to think about that and all of the things I could have done differently. Also, I think this is a question Raluca can answer as well. I'll go, I'll pitch in, and then Raluca can also pitch in. I think the most important thing I would have done differently is spend less time in isolation. And I think this was also something very particular to that time, because we weren't as connected as we are today. But I think what happened is, because I was a freelancer for the first 5 years of my career, I didn't get to interact as much with people. So when students generally ask me, like, what's better to do, go freelance or apply for a role in a company, I almost always say apply for a role in a company, because then you're going to be surrounded by like-minded people. You're also going to be surrounded by other designers, hopefully. So you'll have people to learn from. If that's not possible, communities like Design Buddies or like Mento, where you belong to a group of people, can also help you. And I think this is, again, I would have done many things differently, but one of the things would have been to be part of a community faster, because it can help you grow, and find a mentor. Like, I think those are really critical. And I'll let Raluca pitch in as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with Radu. But just to add on this, I believe what I would have done differently, even though I realized while going into my first job, was like, you should let go of perfectionism. So perfectionism is definitely not your friend when you learn design, and you need to get comfortable with iteration. You need to get comfortable with this mentality of always getting better and always changing stuff, and not falling in love with your solution. I remember before I joined Mento and working as a designer, I was stuck on this mentality of, hey, I did this is my work, it's good. If it's, if there's a mistake in it, I'm gonna change it, but otherwise I delivered, just that, give me something else, which is not a correct way to think in design, because you're always going to iterate on your solution. You always need to be aware of feedback from all sources, even if you're talking to other designers or to your client or to developers. So your work is never finished. Your focus should always be on always making things better, not perfect from the start, because that's not gonna happen. And once you learn to do this, and you're comfortable with iteration, you'll love the process and you'll feel much more comfortable in the role.
Spot on, Raluca. Before we take the next question, I just want to let everyone know that if we don't get to your question, or if you still have questions about bootcamps and courses and programs, you can always go to our website and book a free call, no strings attached. You'll probably talk to Raluca, Summer, Zoe, or I, and we can spend time one-on-one with you and answer all of your questions. Okay, I think the next question comes from Akin. So let's see, you're still here. So I'm going to ask you to unmute. And if you want, you can come on stage and ask your question live.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Actually, my question was about artificial intelligence, which is quite hype recently. And I'd like to learn about your opinions as an educator, designer, mentor on AI, and many jobs and professions are feeling risky because of AI. I know that it's not going to happen for UX. We don't have a big risk, even for visual and UI design. We still need a big chunk of human factor, but I just want to know your opinion on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking your question live. And for anyone having that question and wondering, what's up with AI? How is it going to influence my life as a designer? Should I even go into design because now AI can design? We actually have, our last webinar was entirely on that. We had invited as a guest Ruben Hassid. He has over 150,000 followers on LinkedIn. He talks a lot about AI. So if you haven't seen that, look us up, Mento Design Academy on YouTube. The recording is there, and it provides a lot of insight. But to answer the question right now as well, briefly, for the moment, the way we see it is AI is a tool, and much like Figma made it easier to design websites than previously using Photoshop, which wasn't optimized for that, and in the same way that the internet is really a tool that transformed many jobs for a lot of people. It created a lot of roles that didn't exist in the past. Now people have transitioned, or people have learned how to use it, and they're using it for their businesses or for their craft. For the moment, we have a very powerful tool on our hands, and the thing is, you need to know what to ask of it. So if you're not a designer, it's going to be very hard for you to know what to ask. Sure, you can say, design me an app, but how do you know what the AI has given you is good. And actually, the topic that Ruben and I spend most of our time was, right now you need a human to qualify that output, to say whether it's good, it's bad, does it serve the purpose. And I still think you need all of the knowledge of a designer to be able to do that and to be able to leverage what the AI has created. But a lot more on that topic on the recording that's on YouTube. So I really encourage you to look us up, Mentor Design Academy on YouTube. All right, as we answer the last few questions, I also want to invite everyone to share their LinkedIn so we get to connect, and this is not just a one time event, and once it ends, we never connect again. So we also want to make this very social and interactive. So feel free to share your LinkedIn here. I think someone already shared, Kathleen already shared my LinkedIn and Raluca's, and we're gonna feel free to connect with us. Again, like I said, feel free to go to our website, book a call if you'd like to know more. No strings attached, just an opportunity for you to ask more questions. All right, let's see. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. What was the next one? All right, someone was interested in meeting full stack web designers. I think it's a great place here. All right, Yassine, I think. Let's see, are you still online? Yes, you are. I just sent an invite if you want to come up and ask your question live.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I'm glad that you chose my question. I was wondering if you will if you will suggest it or not. So it's great. So my question is as follow. I am like I'm an IT developer. Sorry, I will use the noise. I'm an IT developer and I'm trying to change my career to UI UX. I'm basically freelance in designing and video editing. So as UI UX domain, let's say it's interesting for me. While it includes like psychology aspects, and it's really like using intellectual and for the UX part, it's like a great interaction with the users. So I'm like wondering if UX UI is recommended and demanded in the world, because what I heard, like UX UI isn't like really demanded, because in real a huge team like 20 persons from developer for developers, it's like one UX UI designer is sufficient. So I would like your opinion to this question. I hope you understand me so well.
Yeah, no, I understood. Thank you so much for coming online and asking your question live. So I think you brought up a really good point. So you said, and I would have answered this anyways, that currently there's usually one designer to 20 developers. That's the kind of thing you see mostly. And ideally, you have one designer to 5 developers. So let's just look at the ratio and how much can it be improved. So if we have 1,000 developers on the market, and right now it's 1 designer to 20 developers, but the ideal ratio is 1 to 5, then you can, I'm not as great with math, but you can do the math and see how much more designers you need. The main reason for why, you might hear that, or like why this ratio still exists of 1 to 20 developers, is not all companies, although I think that has changed a lot, not all companies understand the benefits of something well designed, because they say, like, people use it, so why would I spend money designing it better? What's going to change is the more designers you have on the market, the more having a well-designed product is not going to be, something, a unique advantage. It's almost going to be absolutely demanded by your customers, because they have been used with good design from other companies, big companies like Spotify, Uber, Netflix, right? You have really good experiences, really good design. And, if you're trying to build a competitor to any of those apps, or like, any other product, and you're coming up with an experience that's not as great, people will move away from it, or they're not going to adopt it because they've been used with something much better, right? And I think, maybe an analogy is if you live in a country with like really good service in restaurants and you go to a country that doesn't have as good services, you're going to feel it right away. You're going to say, well, I prefer the great service in that other country. I don't prefer this one, right? So hopefully I've answered your question. All right, I think we have, let's see. All right, let's do maybe 2 questions more. So let's see the next one. All right. I think Gala also asked, how did you get into UX UI design? I will say shortly by accident. I was just doing something that I loved, and one thing led to another. I didn't make a conscious choice. So I think if you're here today and you're saying, I want to be a UX designer, that's not how it happened to me. I was just like spending a lot of time in front of a computer as a nerdy kid, and I ended up learning how to design. All right, let's see. Questions. Okay, so let's see. Could you recommend, okay, let's see. Fernando, are you still with us? Yes, you are. I sent a request to unmute if you want to come on stage and ask your question live. It's also fine if you don't want to. Okay. Let's see. All right, Christine. Let's see, she also had a question. I sent an invite to unmute if you want to come online and ask your question.
I asked a few questions, so I'm not sure which one you want me to bring.
I'm looking at the one about being a multidisciplined designer.
Okay. I guess I was wondering which skills were most transferable, because I've got a background in environmental design, graphic design, interior design, web design, communications. And I do have a background in psychology also. I heard that mentioned. And so I was wondering, which are the most transferable skills? And also I'm a little late to the party on the AI. So how important is that going to be?
Right. Thank you. I mean, if that's all in your background, I think you have a very relevant background to transition to UX design. Which skills would be most transferable? Let's see. I'm going to mute you because there's some echo. Sorry. So if I were to pick the most relevant background or skills to UX design, obviously graphic design would be the most relevant for UI design because a lot of things still apply from graphic. I would also say like interior design is very relevant because you get used to designing something for humans that they would thrive in, right? And it's like, oh, how do I create this? How do I create the design of this home to be efficient, to be pleasant? And those are all qualities that you want from a digital product as well. So my choices would be graphic and interior design. All right, let's see if we have another question. Okay. Let's see. We have LinkedIn's. That's great. Share your LinkedIn so we can connect. Okay. I think we cover most of the questions. Okay, we have one more from Michael. Let's see. Are you still online with us? You are. I just sent in a request to unmute. So you can come on stage and ask your question live.
Definitely appreciate it. You've answered quite a bit. I've been trying to, do a transition in my research. I've learned that there are some different pathways into the UX path, I guess. Among them design, research, strategy, writing, and I know you can get a little bit more specific, micro copy, like all this stuff. And I presume it's better to come in as a generalist, but I wanted to know, should we enter with a specific destination in mind? Are we going to do a little bit of everything? Is that the best focus? Or I'm sure it depends, just kind of based on your background. If you have a lot of research, then, UX research makes sense, but we'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. I think this is both something that myself and Raluca can answer, because I'm sure she considered this as well as she was transitioning. I would say my recommendation, if you haven't done design yet, right, and you have all of these avenues that you could pursue, is I would try to come in as a journalist, discover what I enjoy, and then eventually, if I want to, I can specialize on something. Because even if you come from, say, a research background, and you'd say, well, research makes most sense for me because I have a background in research, academical research is very different from UX research. And I actually had, I hired someone from an academic research background, and we were trying to train this person on UX research. And she was struggling a bit, because in what's specific about UX research, so research within the tech industry, is you need to be really fast. Like precision will matter less, and getting quick answers to your questions would be more important, because you can't wait like 6 months to get a result, and then you can make a decision. By that time, most of your competition just ousted you already, right? So that would be my take. I don't know if Raluca wants to add anything on top of that.
Yeah, sure. So I would say, I don't know, don't stress too much in the beginning on which path you should take. Just try to be honest to yourself, try to do a lot of self-reflection, just to understand what you like the most. Because, for example, when I went into Mento, I was sure that, hey, I don't know, I want to do wireframes for the rest of my life. This is the part of the process that I like, for example. But then I discovered that I had really great skills in UX research. So, and my first job, my role was a little bit more tailored towards UX research as well, while also developing my UI skills. Later on, to learn that I'm also good at UI and practice that. So, just go with it, but always try to self-reflect and see what you enjoy the most.
Yeah, I think Raluca brought up a really good point, which is one of the exercises that we have plenty of for our students at Mento is reflection pieces. Because you need to, once you've done something, you need to stop, kind of make a conscious effort to reflect on what you've done and discover, I like it, I hate it, I would do it again. And I think that can help. Did we answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I appreciate that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, I think we have the last question was from Christine. Christine, did you have like a follow-up to our question? Not sure. I sent an invite to unmute, but maybe that wasn't, I think it was just a thought.
Okay. I guess I was curious how the interface design differed from UX UI, but then you also did not include web design in the skill set. So I was even more confused, because I imagined it to be more along the interface design realm.
Absolutely. So first off, I just picked my top favorites out of that. But I would tell you this, like I see a lot of designers with in their portfolios saying, here's my UX UI portfolio, and then it's a website. And I think what's important to understand is if you're building, like if by web design, you mean that, you know, one pager, landing page, selling a product, or like showcasing art or whatnot, that to me, at least, and I know several other people, doesn't really count as, I mean, it's relevant for the fact that it's an interface, but I think that the skills are not that of a UX UI designer, because that is a marketing skill, right? You are trying to sell a product. And as a UX designer, you are trying to build a solution. So it's a little bit different. And yeah, I don't see web design as, you know, I would take an interior designer anytime over a web designer, because they're more focused on researching the person and building something for them rather than, you know, creating a sales page, right? So I think this is why I really mentioned, obviously, interface design in the sense of like, you know, creating a visual interface through which you interact with a machine is a relevant skill. But I think when you mention interior design, that also includes that human research and human focus, which I'm very passionate of. But thank you for following up with that question. All right, well, I think we managed to cover all of our questions, which is very rare. Thank you everyone for coming online and answering these questions live. This is the first time actually that we tried that, and I really enjoyed it. If you haven't shared your LinkedIn already in the chat, do go there, share your LinkedIn so we can connect. Feel free to connect with myself or Luca, and feel free to you know, go to our website, book a call if you'd like to find out more. Also, you can view, especially with the AI question, you can see all of our past webinars recordings on YouTube. Just search for Mento Design Academy. You've been all great and very engaging. Thank you so much for staying for an hour and 20 minutes. And we'll see you next time. We'll just leave this Zoom open so you have time to click on those links and connect with everyone. We're going to turn off our cameras, and we'll see you on the next event. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Raluca, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.